Good morning and welcome to Rise and Shine Sundays. I'm your host, Jamie Rich, where every Sunday morning we wake up to what's emerging. Has anyone ever come up to you and said to you, I just want to get your reaction about something? Or they say, I told you that just to get your reaction to something. And they kind of caught you off guard and you weren't for sure what the difference, they all of a sudden people just kind of came out and said, I'm just trying to get a reaction out of you. Well, today, our question that we're going to be discussing on Rise and Shine Sundays talks about what happens when you're geared to react instead of respond. Now, we live in a world of reaction. We live in a world where we have Facebook likes and where we look about clicks, and we really know about the world sometimes by the way in which people are reacting. But what if we were able to kind of look at that analogy and not necessarily focus so much on our reactions? Because sometimes our reactions can be way out of alignment with how we choose to respond. As I've said this morning, our conversation is going to be what happens when you react instead of respond? And as we do every Sunday morning on Rise and Shine Sundays, we invite you to be part of this discussion. We are having an unscripted, unfiltered. The only thing that the people on the round table know is that we have a central question. And one of the beauties of that particular approach to us doing things is that we will start a lot with what our reaction is to this very question. And then we'll be thinking about what our responses are. So we invite you to be part of that conversation. If you are joining us in the chat this morning, please reach out and say hello. And as we do that, I want to be able to introduce our roundtable for this morning. Good morning, all. Good morning, Sang.
Good morning. How is everybody?
Good, good, good. What is your first reaction to the day?
To today or the day itself? I'm always about being specific. My first reaction this morning when I got up was, what is today going to be like?
Mhm.
Right. I know I went to bed rather early last night. I've slept a lot the last couple of days. So that to me already indicates for myself there's something going on emotionally within me that I haven't really tapped into yet, because I typically don't sleep as much as I have been the last couple of days. So that's one thing to recognize for myself. But reacting is always a fun thing. Even as we got on here and our infamous, I don't know what happens. We just have to push the button, right? And it
Yep,
doesn't happen, and
yep.
then we just got to go with it.
What Sang is referring to is that this morning, when I was getting everything set up, I had no microphone, no camera, and I got to see the three of you respond going, whoa, how are we going to deal with this?
Right.
Good morning, Ray.
Good morning.
And how are we reacting on a Sunday morning?
Well, yeah, just reaction's an interesting thing, and actually, I think we just experienced our first reaction was the technology forces you to react.
It does. It does. Just like I talked about in the opening is that, we are geared right now to be reactive. Everything is done to elicit some type of a reaction. So recognize that one of the things that we're going to carry through in this discussion today is the difference between a reaction that you experience and a response that you consciously choose. And someone who consciously chooses to be with us every Sunday, hello, Ollie. Good morning to you, or good afternoon, I should say.
Yeah, good afternoon, because it's already 4 p.m. right now in Belgium. And so actually, I am responding. When I was waking up, I was probably reacting about, let me just prepare myself breakfast, coffee. And then I took a breath, and I said to myself, remembering, I shall stand for love. And I can talk about that later on, but I'm going to yield you the mic.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And if you are joining us in the chat live on YouTube, please feel free to react this morning and say good morning or say whatever time of the day it is for you, because we're glad you're here for this discussion on Rise and Shine Sundays. So let's kind of go back to look at that. Again, our question today is what happens when you react instead of respond?
Mm-hmm.
So as I bring this conversation back to the group, who would like to react with a response?
Oh goodness. I'm gonna go first because I like to go first.
Well, you're really good with helping us set definitions.
Yeah, so I'm kind of gonna give you. I was just talking about this in my book club. I always talk about book club since that's what I have literally 30 minutes before this, and we were talking about shame. Is what we're talking about in that particular book club today, and let's talk about the difference between reaction and a response, right? I always like to use something where, if somebody goes to hit you, right, your automatic response is like you're going to put your hand up so they don't hit you, right? Like
Right.
it's automatic, it's trigger. It's the first thing that comes to your head. There's no thinking about it. It's just what happens, right? Then you have the responding. And let's say if you were going to try to respond to someone going to hit you, right? You're not going to go, hold on just a second. Let me figure out how to do this first, right? That's not really going to happen, right? Now, there's a way for you to step back and walk away, or you decide some other motion to do, and that's going to be that's a response and / a reaction, right? So it's almost that distinction of figuring out what it is for you, right? Ultimately, the way I describe a reaction is that first thing that pops off. If somebody says something and it just automatically comes out of your mouth and you go, did I say that out loud? Right? Because I've caught myself there for sure. Go ahead.
It's so interesting to hear you say that because, we've melded the two right now.
Yes. Uh-huh.
We used to talk about what you're talking about is that automatic reflex, right?
Yep.
The response, if you will, the reaction that you have that is triggered and
Yep.
just comes out by default. Interestingly enough, for those of us who have been alive a long time, we have separated, we no longer separate the reaction from the response. So we call them now auto responders, right? We use that term a lot, correct? And Ray, I want to switch because while we're doing some terms, do you think that that's intentional to, in a modern world, link, react, and response so that there is no separation between the two of them?
That's a really good question. Is there again back to the technology and perhaps what's surrounding us today is the systems are set up for us to do both at the same time. And in the past, in communication and in activities, generally what was recommended is pause before you open your mouth instead of just immediate reaction. But we're back to what's actually happening. And I think there's a body response. If something, before you even open your mouth, there's a body response. And it's a question of what's the time like. So I think, yeah, I would agree that everything today is intended for you to either react by clicking, react by, I'm going to respond to that immediately. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. So,
Right.
Yeah. It's so funny when I purposely did not think too much about this question before we announced it because I really wanted to sort of see what's emerging. But, Ollie, was there anything that kind of came to mind for you in terms of the difference between reaction and I caught you just in the middle of while you were doing something. What's your genuine idea about the difference between response and reaction?
So, by instance, your talk to me was obliging me to react and not to respond, because normally I take my time to respond, but I was taking my time also to analyze, because Sang is good at definitions and I'm good in languages and etymology. So I was searching about react and respond. And so react is acting in opposition. Like there is a force that comes and we oppose something. We oppose the strength, the force. And then respondeo in the Latin is more like a pledge or promise. Offer a pledge or a promise when it comes to something that comes to us. That's about the word. For me, I realize also that the difference between the act, the react and the response is the time that we have at our disposal, or the time that we allow ourselves to create. And in a world that is so fast, it's more and more difficult difficult to respond instead of react, because the world is demanding us to respond. Like, how many times on school you have to have 5 or 10 minutes to produce something, and you don't allow yourself to breathe. You in fact, it's like vomiting, regurgitate something from your brain. And so for me, it's the time. And if I have not the capacity or the will to have the time between the action and to be able to respond instead of react, then if I react, I might regret it later. If I respond, if I allow time, then I can say, okay,
Beautifully
it
said.
was probably not the best response, but I did my best.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said, Ollie. And I can see saying, I want to turn to you right now and say, we can talk about this in the analytics and the abstraction of the difference between reaction and response, but what happens in people's lives when they don't understand the difference? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So if you think about a time when someone has said something, and again, you say something so quickly and you are filled with anger and rage, and typically a reaction when it's verbally said, or even an action itself where it's violence or something where it's like hostile, right? That person has then, an activation has been put in them, right? Where something was said, where they were triggered by something you said, triggered by something that was done or whatever. And a response comes from the place of, I can see what's happening. I don't feel it in my body because I'm calm, right? Because a reaction, you're going to feel it somewhere. Like if someone says something to me that is where I feel shamed, I feel judged, I feel chastised in a certain way, I typically feel it in my stomach, right? I start feeling in my stomach, my heart starts racing, and I go, okay, I don't really know how to respond to this. I don't really know what to say. So do I say what's on my mind? And is that going to be filled with emotions? Because typically it's going to be an emotional vomit, right? Because now I'm reacting to everything this other person is saying, because this other person is just saying everything or doing everything, versus a reaction. Versus a response where I'm now what I called embodied with myself, right? I'm able to now look at the situation while in the situation and say, is it good for me to react? Because I know the difference. If I say this, this, and this, and this is probably going to happen. However, I realize this other person is in an activation mode.
Okay.
Let me take a step back.
Okay.
Right? And that goes back to that critical awareness that we talked about last week. But go ahead.
Right. So let's unpack it. Let's keep them separate for the minute. We've agreed this morning here on Rise and Shine Sundays that there is a difference between reaction and response, right? And in the short time that we've been on air this morning, this is the second time the word regurgitation has come up in terms to describe. But what I loved about what Ollie said to us is that most of the time, the reactions that we get are oppositional forces in our lives. We don't get a reaction unless that energy is oppositional to where we are. So if I came up and said, Ray, what about that beard? What about that beard? You've got a beard, and so like all of a sudden, Ray, who wasn't even thinking about his beard 10 seconds ago, right, is all of a sudden in this oppositional thing going, well, what's wrong with it? And whereas I can use that example delicately with my friend Ray, oftentimes we are not aware of how many times we are intentionally being poked for our response, right? The intent of the response is to really inflict that contrast on it, right? So, anyone, saying, did you have something more to say about that?
Well, I think recognizing when you can realize when you're getting defensive about something, right? When you're getting defensive about something that someone said or someone did, and you're now defending your actions, you're defending your emotions, you're defending that bubbly feeling that you have in your body, that is what I personally call a reaction. You're having it there, but then that part where you turn it into a response, if we go back to the basics back in the day when they said think before you speak, they just forgot to tell us how to do that.
Right.
Right. And now it's pause before you speak, right? Because now it is, okay, I can see this person is activated. Again, this is that self-critical awareness, not just of self, but of others around you, which is very challenging sometimes, right? Because this is where you have to be able to know yourself enough to know, am I going to respond to what's being asked of me? Or what they're trying to poke to get out of me? Are they poking me to get a reaction? Or are they poking me to understand my perspective?
I love that. So we have to also be aware of the intent of the poke, right? You know,
Yes and no. I would say yes and no, right? Because we will never know their intention unless we ask them. So exactly why are you asking me this? Because that's where then you get to ask a direct question if you're comfortable enough because you definitely have to be in a state of calm for myself to ask that question. Because you could ask that and then the bear we just go, now we're two bears in the wild.
and that is a very brilliant thing that has just emerged as far as a question like, why are you asking me that? Now, there, like if I'm going to use Ray. Ray, do you mind if I continue to use Ray in the beard example?
Yeah.
Like if I'm like going, Ray, that your beard, and Ray can counter that oppositionally and go, well, what's wrong with my beard? Or why are you, or Ray can, from that point of the pause neutrality, right, say, what are you seeing about my beard? In other words,
What troubles you about beards?
yeah. Why are you asking that question? And it's interesting because in that moment, we take control of our own reaction. In other words, it's beginning to recognize that between reaction and response is an opportunity for you to learn about your responses, right? With full awareness that some people are going to continue to poke you. And I think that this is really an important thing to get, because oftentimes, I don't know, I'm sure none of you have been in therapy, and I'm sure no one in the audience has either. But, we sometimes think that, well, I learned what my reactions were. I know all this. But on a visceral, automatic level, has your body learned what your mind thinks it should have?
I think that we don't I personally, from my own experience, don't think that we pause enough to listen to our body, for our mind to hear what our body is saying. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been sleeping a lot the last 2 days, and it's not like me. So I've also been dreaming. So I know that there's some emotional occurrences happening within myself. And I know that simply because I've documented those things. And so when you know that certain things are happening because my body is telling me, then it's not necessarily something for me to go, let me just pinpoint every single moment. But it's something for me to be aware of, to know that potentially a conversation that I have in the next couple of days, I could potentially have a reactive response, or I will have a calm response. And I think that's something about knowing self for sure.
Let me, I'm going to put something from the chat I've learned this morning that I can be savage, and sometimes savagery is necessary. Now, our good friend Jessica is adding an LOL at the end of that. But I also want to remind people that when we talk about reaction and response, it doesn't always mean that your response is going to be some measured neutrality part to be. Just like you were saying earlier on, if somebody is coming at you with a punch, yes, I guess Kung Fu master can sit there, and let his body go completely tense and be able to absorb the shock or whatever. But most of us don't operate in that level. And sometimes we do need to recognize that we do need to cut off. We do need to make sure that someone stops. We do need to make sure that if somebody is intentionally poking us too much, that you simply say stop, right?
Right.
So, but the idea then is, again, going back to this idea of recognizing that there's a reaction that you're going to have, there's a response that you can make, and if you have not been in a lot of situations where you've been poked, and I can't imagine who those people are on the planet, maybe they're off in a forest somewhere, but the rest of us who have been lived in a world where we are continuously poked for our reaction, can begin to take that pause and choose how we want to respond. And if I can say this, practice that as part of our daily life, develop that. Ray, you're nodding. Was there something about
Yeah,
that?
I'm just absorbing it all because, there's so many situations where this kind of happens, where you have to sort of listen to your body, as Sang has said, and understand that, okay, that's a moment of clarity, is your body's reacting, so become aware, and then um, decide, if possible, by pausing, what you're going to do about it. And I like the fact that you said, well, tell the person to stop poking you. Is a good is a measured response, but it's also a way of shifting away. Or what Sang did with questions is, why are you saying that, or what is that? So broadening what's happening so that you can have more latitude, if you want to say that, to develop a response. Is this really a dead end because the person's not going to stop poking you, and then you have a choice of walking away or
Right.
or whatever. But I think that's kind of the learned experience. Is once you've sort of had that a couple times, then you realize that, oh, there are choices
Mm-hmm.
there, and there are options to some degree. But yeah, the poking is kind of
Yeah.
that's probably a whole topic by itself.
Yeah. So there's a Rise and Shine Sunday. Well, we're get your hokey pokey, like what's going on with the pokes. But
Right.
let me continue, because there's some responses in the chat that I want to make sure that we kind of bring into the mix here, which is when Jessica was talking earlier about her choice of, she learned this morning that she could be savage, and sometimes that savagery is necessary. I also want to talk about the conditioning that we do to ourselves, right? That she says, I say that because reaction and response, I typically talk myself down and smooth something over that's truly not, right? And I knew that you were going to shake your head no on this, saying, and I want to talk about that because I'm going to do something here. I'm going to speak from my own experience. I think sometimes we have to make a choice, right? And there may be one of those situations where it is not safe for us, right, to strike back or whatever, because what is that cliche? Never get into a pissing contest with a skunk, right? Because you're going to come out of it, just smelling even worse, right? And I think that sometimes we have to recognize that some of us, especially a lot of women, especially a lot of other people, have been told, well, just don't say anything. Just calm yourself down. Calm down. Don't make that happen. Everything's going to be okay. Which, on one level, is a survival strategy.
Sure.
When it becomes something that prevents you from advocating for yourself, right? That's when it begins to be a problem, or it begins to be a challenge. I have, in certain situations where I have felt very threatened, but again, it's because I'm old, and I'm going to say this in a way, again, speaking from my own experience. I happen to be a white cisgendered male, right? I can get away with things that other people cannot, right? So I don't need to pick a fight in a particular moment, right? I can, choose that response. But I have also not been somebody who's been sat in a room often and silenced and discounted for my reaction. And I'm sure that's where that no came from, right? Saying that was sort of what was sprung out of that.
Yeah, a little bit, because there's also that I always go back to self, right? To self-awareness, right? To go, Jessica had a savage response versus sometimes savagery is necessary, right? So that's where it's like what I need to say something, and it's time to say something because I've been sitting in it too long, right? To then, her next, the next conversation was about, she'll talk herself through it, which again, totally get that. We talk ourselves through it and go, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. And then it happens again, right? And then it happens again. And then what happens is now we are savage because we have been poked so many times that we didn't stand up for ourselves the first 400 times, that 401, I'm not having it anymore.
Right.
Right. And then but there's also that level of not just that self-awareness, but knowing when a person's doing it, because we do have a tendency to be like, that's just how they are. Right. Well, here's what I'm here to tell you. They can be how they are, but you also get to let them know how they can be with you.
Can we stop right there? Can someone put that on the sampler, the mic drop moment? Because that is beautifully said, which is there are those situations where you can be fully aware that that is that other person, and you can then choose how that proceeds forward. Like, you don't need to correct that other person because there's absolutely no value in it for you. Anyone want to build on what Sang was talking about? Yeah, Ollie.
Yes, first I was going to respond with the metaphor of the sponge. I would say sponge, because each of us have different bandwidth of how to react. Sometimes it reduces with some persons, some environments, because an environment can be stressful and the ability of responding is really low in this kind of environment. Sometimes he's the kind of person, and we don't know also the full life of people. Maybe it's like onions, there are a lot of layers. The parents, the neighbor, the work, this, and this adds up. That really reduces the bandwidth of the sponge of this person. Like this famous quote, like an angry black woman, because she has, quote unquote, to be polite, to be, and as a white guy, I realize also that I'm not facing that. But then there is also the was thinking also, it's about asking, let them and let me. I realized that was a book from Mel Robbins. So let them means that you can allow them to be themselves, but then let me. What is in my control? If someone is constantly triggering me, what is in my control is if this person is not able to understand, then I can avoid to be in with this person the next time. So it's what is in our control in order to be able to respond instead of react. Because it's if we are all with our reptilian brains always react, it's not going to solve a lot of things. It
Right.
just takes one person to withdraw,
Right.
to really calm the and to be able to pass from react to response.
Correct. So again, this morning we're talking about what happens when you react instead of respond. And in our roundtable, in our impromptu roundtable discussion, as we discuss about what's emerging, one of the things that Ollie
We are back.
Yeah, we are live. One of the things that you were talking about is that we have this reptilian brain, this animal brain. But you know what? We're still going to have that reptilian brain, that animal brain, after we've had an awareness. And that's where I'm inviting us to consider that this is a lot about developing a practice and allowing yourself to experiment and practice to develop a new reactive pattern for yourself. Because sometimes you just can't. I mean, maybe you're just that intellectually and super spiritual human being that can learn from an aha moment, and it just automatically becomes a somatic experience for you, and that's wonderful. Sometimes that does happen to us, but for many of us, and in many situations, we have to practice. We have to be able to sort of make sure that it sticks, so that that animal brain response gets muted and learns something new. Right? When I walk my dog, she's by her nature. We had a lab at one time. A lab, everybody was his friend. Her default response is she's wary of people. It's the way her animal brain is wired. And I watch now the cues that she needs to receive in a moment to make sure that she's comfortable with people, right? Because if somebody comes at her with her hand, she's going to do exactly how Sang opened up the show this morning, with the idea that you're going to go to swat it away, right? But if somebody understands, if she begins to learn in that moment, what that is, if there's time, right, something different and magical happens. So, can we help people who want to learn how to repattern their reactions? Is that something? Could we offer some? Yeah, saying you're smiling and you've got a little nod there. What can we help? How can we help people and ourselves to understand about establishing new patterns about our reactions?
Yeah, I'm gonna start with the Mel Robbins book. I've not read the book. Let Them. I've heard people talk about the title of the book, but not really what's in the book. So, and so I've had a little bit of a rebuttal with that for myself. So, simply because I haven't read the book, so I want to preface that. Is what if you do the opposite, which is kind of what Ollie was saying? Let me, instead of let me, it's tell them, right? Tell them, because if you are not advocating for yourself and then let them show up, right? Tell them what you appreciate about them. Tell them what you need. If someone's triggering you, tell them why that is bothersome to you. Tell them what you mean, what's going on with you, right? Then let them show up. Again, have no idea what her book's about other than the title that everybody says, Let Them. And I'm like, okay, cool. Don't know what's in the book yet. But if we're on the opposite side of that, is what you're saying, because if what they're saying and they're vocal enough or triggering us or doing whatever to get a response or reaction out of us, then what it means something to them, right? But you staying silent, what does that do for you, right? What if something matters to you, something you want to say it, sometimes like we were talking about, sometimes we stay quiet because we want to keep the peace. Whose peace? How long do we have to hold on to our own peace because we keep burying what we're not willing to say out loud, right? Then, do we want to continuously be misunderstood? How many times have I explained this to 16,000 people that this is how I do math, right?
Right.
These are things that make me feel this way because I'm going through X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It's like the example I always talk about, the people at the copy machine. If you go to the copy machine and someone's at the copy machine, you're like, hey, I need to use the copy machine. I need to get these 50 copies. And they're like, no, wait your turn. Right? Then if someone's here. And then if you go to the copy machine and say, hey, I need to get this out because I got to be at a doctor's appointment at 4:30 and this and this and this. Can I go ahead and get in front of you and make these 40 copies? Right? Tell them, instead of saying, just putting it out there and just leaving it there. Give them the reason, because now if they don't know that you had to go to do XYZ, they don't know that you're going through all these other things. They don't know that what you said hurt them. So we have to be able to tell them and then to me, it's tell them and then let them show up how they show up.
Yeah, and again, saying one of the things I appreciate so much about your approach to these things is that you're inviting us on a journey of self-verification, right? You can hear all these things in abstractions, but it doesn't make a difference until you decide in that moment to verify what's true for yourself.
Correct.
That pause comes, and that pause exists so that you can stop the automatic, right? Oftentimes we tend to think that everything that happens to us is, it's like all referral, we have to do, but wait a second, let's deconstruct all of that. Just like you did, you remember a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the 180 flip, which was, and when you go back to tell them, you went from let them to tell them. Because for you, a lot of what happens for you is when you inform people about what you need or how they're coming across, that begins to not only flip the switch for others, but it is a great way of using your self-verification. In this moment, I really need you guys to be very supportive and engaged in what the conversation that we're having today. I say that as a way of informing you so that I don't have to sit there and wait for you to react and respond, right? You already have I've already given you the invitation as to how I want you to respond. And I think sometimes we think, and we'll go back to, I know Ray would probably chime in on this, we have a lot of concepts about what words mean, right?
Mhm.
But we often sometimes, because we don't inform, because we don't tell people, because we aren't clear on what we want to, look, I'm sharing this news with you so that X, Y, and Z, or I'm having this meeting right now so that we can accomplish X, Y, and Z. We oftentimes do not inform, right? And so then we're ending up with all these reactions, right? That are just all over the map, right? And we're talking, Ray, did you want to say anything in that direction?
Yeah, I love what you just what's saying, and you just did, Jamie, is the fact that by adding what I refer to as context, by giving a little bit more information, that allows the recipient or the listener or the person there to have a choice. Like, hey, I need to get these copies done because then I have
Mhm.
the choice of, well, I'm not in a hurry, go ahead. Or
Mhm.
I'm sorry, but my meeting's before yours. It's only going to
Right.
take me 10 minutes because I have 5 copies. So then there's a bit of more of an exchange going on. But what's been created is a new level of understanding. The situation shifted because somebody provided more context and more information. Also,
Mhm.
I just want to add one other element that came to me as you guys were sharing that is the time factor. It takes me longer to process.
Yeah.
So what I've had to start to do, I'm still not very good at it, is what Sang mentioned is sort of say to provide at least some information for the individual to say, I'm not ready to respond to that yet, but
Mhm.
I'm going to come back to it because it takes, like I always my time lag is sometimes quite long, that something gets said in a conversation and I don't figure it out in my brain till 24 hours later.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
That's
And
a
it's okay, but I think what I like about what you were sharing, saying, is to let the individual know that I'm responding on my own time.
Right.
well, and that is a hard place to do. So if we go back to last week, I believe when we were talking about capacity and threshold, right? It's about being able to say, Jamie, I love that you're asking me to do that. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that today because I don't have the capacity. Is there anything else I can do for you instead?
Right. But you
Because
can only go ahead.
because again, going back to what we were talking about, self awareness of knowing what my capacity is, what Jamie is asking of me in his space, and what I know and I'm willing and able to provide for him without feeling that pressure, if that makes sense.
It
Oh,
does.
definitely.
And as I jumped in, my apologies for doing that, but I wanted to just simply say in that moment, what you're reminding us is that you got there. You got to that ability to be able to have those words come out of your mouth through a process of self-verification, of making sure that you didn't lose yourself in conversations where other
Mhm.
people are not setting the correct container for you to have
Mhm.
those conversations. And
Mhm.
so one phrase that I have learned a lot, because I've gone through some tremendous changes in my own life in the past 5 months or so, is the following phrase: to be honest with you, I don't know. And we're taught that we need to have a response. Like, well, no, 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 you. And what Ray's inviting us to consider is that we can intellectually know, well, I know I'm supposed to have a really good answer at this particular point in time. I know what the correct thing I should probably say in this, but it hasn't connected from here to here. I don't
Mhm.
know. And so I have found myself applying sort of a similar practice to what Sang does. And sometimes I will just simply say, because I usually can make decisions really quickly. I guess, you probably have picked this up, but there are times when I don't have that body or that mind heart connection on something just quite yet. And I would, in the past, have come up with a response that would have made the person feel better and okay. You know what I mean? Like, oh,
Mhm.
I don't really believe this 100%, but I'm just going to tell you this so that we can move on. But I'm developing that somatic muscle to be able to say, to be honest with you, because it's completely honest, I don't know.
Mm. Yep. And,
Yeah.
and it's so hard. It's so hard because we are taught, we are taught and conditioned to respond to everyone around us and react to everyone around us rather than allowing people to respond and react to us. right? Because I've learned life, I feel like, quite the opposite, as being a child who was not allowed to talk, being a person who was not allowed to do anything. I wrote tons and tons of books. Now I find like I hardly ever want to write, but I just want to talk, right? But there's exercising that muscle, especially for me being in a room of men where I'm having to either ask for them to stop talking and to allow me to speak,
Mm-hmm.
because are you kidding me? That was not allowed back in the day. Um, and then, but also, don't think that my heart isn't racing a mile a minute while I'm getting ready to say that thing too, though, right? Because there's a difference between that nervousness of standing up for yourself and advocating for yourself in a moment where someone else is reacting to something.
Great.
And I will say there have been several instances where a person has been very, very angry, yelling, all these things. And I'm like, I don't appreciate you yelling at me right now, so I'm no longer having this conversation with you.
Right.
And I've had to say that 3 or 4 times, because anything they said at that point, I just keep listening, but I'm not listening. And I will just repeat what I said because I'm truly not taking in anything you are saying, simply because I've already said I don't have capacity for this. I don't, there's nothing here. And that's when you let them continuously show up that way, they're continuously now reacting to the fact that you are not responding or reacting the way they want you to. And then again, this is you knowing yourself, but because you have that recognition of the outside already, which again makes it so much harder for us to do the somatic piece and go, what do I feel in my body?
Correct. But ultimately, that pattern interruption has to happen, which is what Ali was talking about earlier, when it just takes one person to shift it. But I know you've been wanting to say something for a while, Ali. What you got?
Yeah. So, first, thank you, Sang, for sharing that. You are really on the spot. Chocolate vibes, and also thank you for raising the vibes also and raising this concern about the process. I think it's maybe Sang knows me, Jimmy knows me, but some person that doesn't know me, and it's up to me to let them know how I process. I need some time, and it's really important to have this emotional intelligence ourselves if we don't want to escalate things. And I feel also it's also the questions, the non-verbal cues, like be able to speak. But if we are seeing people stressing, we are seeing in their non-verbal that they are stressed, and then we can ask them questions. Asking questions with curiosity allows them to respond, so opening the door, and also to realize that we don't know each other's lives.
That's
But
right.
I love Sang share, really, to say, okay, change, slow down the tone. I'm not going to interact with you. It's like having a Teflon barrier, so that we are not playing their games.
Right.
And to say them, it's not it's not because you yell that your message will pass better with me.
Right. And I think there's a great, I love that you brought that up, Ollie, because there's a tone, right, to use. And it's that, it's not a mom voice. I'm not going to say it's not a mom voice. It's literally that tone of like, what I mean right now is business and I'm being serious. What I'm saying to you is what you yelling is not helping me, and I'm not able to have a conversation with you.
Right.
If you're even in a workplace setting and someone's having a conversation, saying, you're having these, because I've always taught my kids, there's a way to have a conversation and be respectful. And you can have a conversation and clearly be disrespectful. If you are clearly asking someone, hey, you know what, you've asked me 7 questions and I'm not sure which one you want me to answer, right? It is that's the distinction that you get to, because otherwise we get overwhelmed by thinking we have to answer the boss's 7 questions they've asked us, instead of saying, okay, you asked me 7 questions. Which one would you like the answer to first? Right? But we're not taught to even question the questions, or even have that to say, we're just taught to answer everything and know everything. And I
Right.
agree with what Jessica said, because sometimes when we say I don't know, we're it's already a thing where we don't know enough, so we're not going to say we don't know.
Right. And I want to bring in Jessica's comment, right? Which
Yeah.
is this was in response to what I said earlier. To be honest with you, I don't know. One of the things that we have to remember when we're having these conversations is that we're not only fighting our personal conditioning in these situations, but we're fighting the larger conditioning in these situations, right? So one of the things that I have to make a conscious decision about is I always want to make sure that I'm in containers where every voice gets a chance to be heard. That's important to me. So that's one of the ways in which I can help bring down the larger deconditioning. Back to your question, yes, in most corporate situations, please, ladies, could you just kind of cut down the chatter, because we're trying to do business here. I've been in those meetings where men have said that, right? I have, so as you know, it is not. That's a lot to unpack in a room when you're a man who is doing it, and I can't always unpack that dysfunction, right? But what I can do is to make sure that the containers that I provide don't have that in there, right? And to recognize that, just like I said, we're fighting not only our personal deconditioning, because yes, we've been deconditioned. Like, if you don't know what to do, what are you, stupid? I mean, how many times has that been said to us? Look, saying this is really important. What do you need to do? You don't have any, what are you, stupid? And all of that conditioning gets us in a personal level, but then we've created systems that allow it, right? And so that's why it's really important for all of us to make sure that when we've had this awareness, right? One of the things I deeply appreciate everybody in this room, but I will refer, if you notice, I will defer a lot when saying is here to the lived experience of someone who has had a stronger road to hoe in this particular than I have, right? That doesn't mean that my experiences are invalid, but I cannot sit in the presence of people who have been silenced and not say, I know that your voices have been silenced a lot more than mine has. And so we are at the same time unpacking our own journey, our own relationships. But just as my good friend Ray has taught me from the very first time that we've met, we have a really deep responsibility right now to make sure that we change the conversational containers with each other, right? Which is why this is not sage on a stage sort of approach. We're allowing people to speak from their expertise.
Yes, and I personally don't want to be slimed, so there's that. Okay, just go back to the slime, and I want to say this too. It is a very hard distinction when you're working on yourself. One of the things is to be super, super honest with yourself, because you have to be able to tell yourself the truth, right? Like saying, yeah, you were a total jackass in that whole meeting. Like, were you okay? Right? Like asking yourself, because I do know for myself, again, the difference in reacting is when I don't feel safe in my own body for whatever reason, right? I can feel it I'll start shaking. My words will start stumbling, but I know in my body, because I know now where it sits in my body, where I'm getting triggered by something someone says, or somebody says something just in general conversation that sparks something within me that will tell me, let's not bring anything up about that topic later. Right. So there's that. And then the place of response is when you're able to kind of be the fly on the wall and look at the entire situation as it is and realize that, there could be some charged emotions in this room. And like Ali said, somebody has to be the person to either walk away, make a statement about what's happening, and let it be there without diving into whatever cesspool of triggers or whatever it is that's happening, to then be able to say, this is how the conversation shifts. Because it does have to start with one person. Conversations will shift with one person. And You can be that person. It's whether or not you're willing to be that person. And I don't necessarily want to say, because people will like to say this, you're not putting someone in their place, okay? Because people like to say that, I'm putting them in their place. No, I'm simply sharing with you my state of being, my state of mind, and you get to show up how you get to show up. And then I get to decide how I continue to show up with you.
Right.
Right. And I think that's huge, because we forget that we have a choice.
So beautifully said. So beautifully said. And I think cesspool of triggers is the title of my life in 2025. Because I think that, when, again, and in all seriousness, what we are inviting people to do is to sort of dismantle this idea that there is a difference. There is a reaction and there is a response. And it comes through being honest with yourself in terms of what's happening. It's also, going back to the idea of self-verifying and recognizing that you're going to be coming up not only against your own conditioning, but conditioning in the larger. And one of the ways in which you can control the situation on the micro level, or we would not use the word control, one of the ways in which you can continue to sort of be a living from what your own values are, is to inform people in the moment how they're coming across or what you might need, so that you can eliminate a lot of the cesspool of triggers, right? Oh, you had an awareness. Hang on a second, because we're getting to the end of the hour and I want to make sure that we wrap up correctly. But we're inviting people on this sort of experimentation with us, right? To be able to say in your own life, understand what that is, the difference between the reaction and the response, to recognize that there is an honest moment that you have to have with this in terms of the way in which you want to inform not only yourself, but the people around you, right? And it comes from that idea of being honest. So in addition to that, as we round out our hour, what was on your mind saying?
I'm going to do my best to sum this up in the smallest amount of words, because I got excited, which means it's going to be on my mind now for the rest of the day. Is that I've been in conversations where people will say, well, I don't know about that culture, because what you were saying, where it starts in our home, it goes to our culture, it goes to society, it goes to whatever our workplace. So everything continues to compound on our experience, where we're continuously shut down and not allowed to talk, or having reactions and how they're received. Right. But the other part of that is somebody mentioned something about educating, because I'm like, in order for someone to know about me, I have to educate you, right? In order to know about my culture, I have to educate you. If I want to know something about your culture, I ask, right? But yet we're also told, it's like this cognitive dissonance that we're constantly sitting in, where people are like, well, if you don't know, I don't know if you don't tell me. Then it's like, well, if you don't tell me, then I don't know. Like, where are we? But then when I tell you, you don't like it.
Right.
Right.
So part of our mission is to create more curious humans. Part of this is about making sure that people are curious, that they can ask, that they can have those conversations, that they don't just accept on a surface level. I mean, was there more that wanted to come out of that emotional stream?
To me, it goes a little deeper for culture specifically, right? Because there are lots of people in different cultures who will get mad because other people are supposed to just know things about someone's culture, right? I was chastised back in probably October when I was told I shouldn't get the Nobel Peace Prize as a Vietnamese woman because I didn't know enough about my culture, right? Which I was like, what do you mean? Right? So then it went into this whole thing, but that person was basing it off of their own culture and how their culture represents their individuals hardcore. However, this same culture will also tear people down. So when I brought that part up, there was not much conversation to that, except back to me that I still wasn't good enough because I wasn't this. So understanding that there is a way to have these conversations where there is momentum and results out of them for how you get to decide how you either get driven to go get a Nobel Peace Prize, by the way.
Yeah. No, you just hit it. You just really hit it.
or whatever that is, because there's a way to have a conversation to still be in the conversation and still both walk away and be cordial and friends and do that. And those are the people that you want to surround yourself with.
Absolutely. Ray, who would you like to surround as far as the thoughts and ideas as we round up our hour?
Well, it's too bad we don't have 2 hours. I'd like to build on what Sang was saying is conversations are important,
Mhm.
but we don't always have the same level of experience to engage in them in a new way. And what struck me with culture is there's equal accountability to learn and to want to learn and to share. So if someone is not aware of a cultural element, I always find it fascinating when somebody shares their cultural context and I go, wow, that's great. That's something that we should be doing too. So yeah, the negative and the positive. And I've heard someone say, just like saying, well, our culture doesn't really reflect this aspect.
Mhm.
So anyways, conversations are bridges, are containers for this learning and unlearning. So there's a two-way street. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Ray. And that's one of the reasons why we want to invite anyone who is watching or everyone who is watching to join us on Sundays for this type of conversation that we're having, because what we're wanting to achieve is that idea of being able to be as inclusive in our conversations as possible. Ollie, you have the
Yeah, few seconds because I have to prepare. Before it's a call to action that I will set up for myself and for others. Before we are tempted to react, could we check in our body and check our internal emotions?
Mhm.
And then to say, okay, is it the appropriate moment? How can I do to add my sponge buffer to avoid to have this emotional vomit on the moment? So checking with our body and have a breath. Thank you. I'm going now to say au revoir.
Au revoir. I know you have another mission, so thank you for the time that you've been with us this morning, Ollie. And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, one of the things that is so true in these moments, we sometimes end where we began with recognizing that body, that I'm going to just say it, that regurgitation is a body response that you cannot step aside. And when the body has a response, it's going to respond in the way that it wants to. So what we're inviting you is to join us back next week to continue to experiment in your life with your reactions and your responses, and to be able to see what emerges through inviting those questions to happen in your world. And again, we will be back here next Sunday at 10 a.m. Central Time to see what is emerging. So if you would like to wake up with what's emerging, come join us next Sunday. Coming up next on the Breakthrough Show Network is Spirit Sessions. And on behalf of Ray, myself, and Ollie, who just left, we thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Ding, ding, ding. Did you find a topic for next week, Jamie? Uh-oh, your mic's not working.